So food. Food is messy. It's sensual, and it can even be a little bit dangerous. And I think for this reason, food has always kind of had a peripheral place in how we imagine the form and function of education. Schools teach us how to analyze, how to listen, how to speak, but what often gets left out are the more tactile arts of living, right? How to touch and smell and taste and experience the world. And I think that's a problem, because there's a lot of lessons about life and society and citizenship that are best learned through experience. And here, we could be using food as a learning platform. So my goal is to take this phrase, food for thought, and extract it from being purely a metaphor, because I think food really does affect how we perceive our environment. And the way that we approach food shapes the way that we think about relationships more generally. So, as was said, I've been working with student food initiatives here at the University of Toronto all throughout my university career. I recently graduated, but I'm still working very intensely with them. And I think I'd like to share just kind of a key insight that I've gained through this work. And it's that somewhere between the garden, the kitchen, and the table, there's this sort of hidden classroom where every day we learn, perhaps subconsciously, how to connect to our bodies, to one another, and to the environment. And I think there's a lot of potential to sort of harness this vital quality of food and eating to begin to address and account for the problems and issues and solutions that we're going to need to think about as we go into the future. So this talk is about the future of food as much as it is about food for the future. First, let me create a bit of a context. Let me take you on a tour of some of the food projects that I'm familiar with so that we're sort of on the same page. The Hot Yam is a great example of a youth-led food project that engages with the principles and politics of food work. So we're a student-run cooking collective here at the university. Every week out of our small kitchen, we serve up hundreds of delicious, low-cost volunteer meals. We use as much local and organic produce as possible, and our meals are animal-free to keep our carbon footprint as small as possible and to also accommodate the widest possible range of dietary preferences and restrictions. And it's really, really great food. Every week, different students take turns choosing the recipes, scaling up the ingredients, and overseeing the kitchen. So when you come to the Hot Yam, you know that a maximum amount of time, care, attention, and intention was put into planning your meal and choosing your ingredients. Volunteers at the Hot Yam know that they're going to be surrounded by fascinating, generous, passionate people. And I think at a campus community where grades and jobs and grants are so fiercely competed for, this creates a really unique environment. And possibly everybody seems to win. It's mind-blowing. And this communal sort of spirit is so palpable, and it materializes itself on every plate. And the food is fabulous. It's flavorful, colorful, fresh, nutritious. It's soul food. And everyone involved in its creation and consumption can feel this jolt, kind of presence, of being embedded in this network of relationships, responsibilities, and consequences. And it's a really invigorating kind of feeling. Elsewhere on campus, we have community gardens like this, creating food for the Hot Yam, food banks, restaurants, and student volunteers. Again, we see young people taking over, but also taking responsibility for public space. And in doing so, transforming space in between classrooms and labs and residences, forgotten space, into kind of spaces worth caring about, to borrow a phrase. And so this is a kind of responsibility without ownership, right? The sort of cultivation of fragmented commons out of the urban landscape. And a rooftop garden like this, for me, epitomizes exactly the kind of creative problem solving we're going to need to carry into the future. Rooftop growing is all about finding solutions within the existing environment. It's about reimagining what is normal and possible. The Sky Garden grew over 200 kilograms of fresh produce this year, and its founders have gone on to establish the U of T Food and Water Institute, a platform for future work and research. For me, these are spiritual experiments as much as they are culinary ones. Planning good food teaches you thoughtfulness. It teaches you consensus making, problem solving, collaboration. Working with good food teaches you patience, trust, cooperation, mindfulness. Sharing good food encourages generosity and reciprocity and communication. And finally, eating good food creates opportunities for celebration and reflection and pleasure and ritual. All of these projects have the spirit of a social enterprise. There's multiple bottom lines going on. And I think this is exactly the kind of multifunctional, dynamic organization that youth want to be exposed to. Everybody wins. And, the more jaded of us will sense the tinge of utopianism floating in here. But for me, I think when we're talking about young people and education, it's a great place to start. And the most interesting thing about all of this that I've shown you so far is that it's not actually that unique at all. There's so many similar organizations and initiatives happening across North America, around the world, and they've been happening for some time. What we're realizing now with tools like the internet is the size and scope of this sort of global movement that we suddenly find ourselves a part of. And I think that signals to us that we're responding to very similar environmental stimulants around the world, and that there's a restless energy amongst young people to renegotiate our relationship with the world. And I think it signals to society at large, but especially governments, especially schools, other institutions, that there's some catching up to do. That we really need to start taking seriously the ideas and the passion of youth when it comes to food, and to give them the tools and opportunities they need to turn these ideas into sustainable, real businesses, organizations, social movements. But sort of opposed to this sort of organic global outcropping of youth-led food movements is the kind of food lessons that we're teaching in the traditional classroom. Nutritional literacy is a very important response to the kind of quantifiable, observable effects of having a broken food system. So we rely on models like these, or this Canada's Food Guide from when I was a kid, to try to teach people healthy eating. But I think the problem here is that the food is so isolated, right? It's sucked out of its social context. Will our lessons about nutrition really stick if we don't first establish a societal evaluation of health? And I'm talking about health in a more holistic way, an ecological kind of definition of health. If we taught students good, healthy relationships to food through the lens of social and environmental well-being, I feel like nutrition would take care of itself. Trying to address the problem the other way around is a little bit backwards to me, or at least like baking bread without heating the oven, You mix together all the ingredients, all the knowledge, but you don't create the kind of environment, the kind of atmosphere that we need for that knowledge to animate itself. And the numbers bear this out. According to one estimate, only 3% of Canadians eat according to the Food Guide. And asking fast food corporations, for example, to advertise the nutritional content of their product seems a similarly backwards approach, because when you're already in the fast food restaurant, I think a lot of the important decisions have already been made or made for you. So we're getting good at putting out food knowledge. What we need to get better at is modeling good food practices, right? Habits. And there's a lot of transformative effects of this. I think that good food turns consumers into producers. And especially for young people, there's something so empowering about creating something in the world. And kitchens and gardens are profoundly productive spaces. Appreciating food work and food production offers us more avenues for the pursuit of happiness and self-fulfillment, and it decentralizes the role of paid employment as the only way that we can be active, engaged, valuable members of society. Food work models principles of community and self-sufficiency. So I think there's a lot of potential here. It's positive stuff. Also, food work turns the idea of political and social participation into deeper forms of engagement. I think for my generation especially, the idea of participation is slowly becoming more and more virtual and abstract. We participate a lot online through Facebook. We trade and circulate a lot of gestures and slogans and symbols, but we know so much about the world today. It's actually becoming more and more difficult in a way to address social problems in a kind of material way. All the issues seem so big. And for young people especially, I think food work is a great way of reconnecting with sort of everyday politics, the politics of everyday life. And it gathers people together in a space, creates opportunities for discussion, for civic engagement. And food work can introduce people to the varied joys of being socially engaged. Finally, I think food work turns an idea of community into the reality of face-to-face communities. And that's definitely something that I've experienced here at the university. We talk a lot about communities, but there's a certain art to getting people around the table or to share a meal. And these are skills that can easily be transposed onto many areas of social life. Food is such a universal experience, I think that it's a powerful tool for transcending difference and nurturing unity. So after all this, I think you can see that food is just such an important learning tool, and I hope that in the future, we continue to find creative ways of supporting and bolstering the efforts of young people as we continue to explore alternative, sustainable food ways. There's just a lot of power here. There's a lot of power in knowing how to feed yourself, of course, but learning to feed other people opens the door to a lifetime of discovery and potential. Thank you.